Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Robin Hood 2010 film. Robin Hood is a 2010 British-American epic war drama film based on the Robin Hood legend, directed by Ridley Scott and starring Russell Crowe, Cate Blanchett, Mark Strong, Oscar Isaac, William Hurt, and Max von Sydow. It was released in 12 countries on 12 May 2010, including the United Kingdom and Republic of Ireland, and was also the opening film at the 2010 Cannes Film Festival the same day. It was released in a further 23 countries the following day, among them Australia, and an additional 17 countries on 14 May 2010, among them the United States and Canada. The film received mixed reviews but made more than $320 million at the box office. Plot. In 1199, Robin Longstride is a common archer in the army of King Richard the Lionheart. A veteran of Richard's crusade, he now takes part in the siege of Chalice Castle. Disillusioned and war-weary, he gives a frank but unflattering appraisal of the king's conduct. When the king asks his opinion, and Robin and his comrades, archers Alan Adale and Wolf Scarlet and soldier Little John, find themselves in the stocks when the king is slain. During an attack on the castle, Robin and his men decide to free themselves in desert. They come across an ambush of the English royal guard by Godfrey, an English knight who has conspired with King Philip of France to assassinate the king. After chasing away Godfrey, Robin decides to take advantage of the situation by having his men impersonate the dead English knight to return to England. As they depart by seafaring ship, Robin promises one of the dying knights, Sir Robert Locksley, to return his sword to his father in Nottingham. Awaking to find they've been brought to London, Robin must continue to assume the identity of Locksley to inform the royal family of the king's death. He witnesses the coronation of King John, who orders harsh new taxes to be collected, dispatching Godfrey to the north to do so, unaware that Godfrey will instead use French troops to stir up unrest and create an opening for Philip to invade England. Robin and his companions head to Nottingham, where Locksley's elderly and blind father, Sir Walter, asks him to continue impersonating his son to prevent the family lands being taken by the crown. Locksley's widow, Lady Marian, is initially cold toward Robin but warms to him when he and his men merrily recover tithed grain for the townsfolk to plant. Godfrey's actions incite the northern barons, who march to meet King John. Speaking now for Sir Walter, Robin proposes the king agree to a Charter of Rights to ensure the rights of every Englishman and unite his country. Having realized Godfrey's deception, and knowing he must meet the French invasion with an army, the king agrees. Meanwhile, the French marauders plunder Nottingham. Robin and the northern barons arrive to stop Godfrey's men, but not before Godfrey has slain the blind Sir Walter. As the French begin their invasion on the beach below the cliffs of Dover, Robin leads the now united English army against them. In the midst of the battle, Robin duels with Godfrey, who attempts to kill Marian and flees until Robin finally kills him with an arrow. From afar, Philip realizes that his plan to divide England has failed and calls off his invasion. When King John sees the French surrendering to Robin instead of himself, he senses a threat to his power. In London, John reneges on his promise to sign the charter, instead declaring Robin an outlaw to be hunted throughout the kingdom. The Sheriff of Nottingham announces the decree as Robin and his men flee to Sherwood Forest with the orphans of Nottingham. Marian narrates their new life in the Greenwood, noting that they live in equality as they right the many wrongs in the kingdom of King John. And the legend begins. Production. In January 2007, Universal Studios and Brian Grazer's Imagine Entertainment acquired a spec script written by Ethan Reif and Cyrus Voris, creators of the TV series Sleeper Cell. Their script portrayed a more sympathetic Sheriff of Nottingham and less virtuous Robin Hood, who becomes involved in a love triangle with Lady Marian. The writers received a seven-figure deal for the purchase. Actor Russell Crowe was cast into the role of Robin Hood, with a fee of $20 million against 20% of the gross. The following April, Ridley Scott was hired to direct Nottingham. He had attempted to get rights for himself and 20th Century Fox, but had previously collaborated with Grazer on American Gangster and signed on as director rather than producer. Scott was not a fan of previous film versions of Robin Hood, saying the best, frankly, was Mel Brooks' Men in Tights because Cary Elwes was quite a comic. Scott's dissatisfaction with the script led him to delay filming, and during 2008 it was rewritten into a story about Robin Hood becoming an outlaw, with the position of sheriff as part of the story. Scott dropped the latter notion, and Nottingham was retitled to reflect the more traditional angle. In June, screenwriter Brian Helgeland was hired to rewrite the script by Reif and Voris. Producer Mark Schmooger explained Scott had a different interpretation of the story from the script, which had the Sheriff of Nottingham as a CSI-style forensics investigator. Scott elaborated the script, portraying the Sheriff of Nottingham as being Richard the Lionheart's right-hand man who returns to England to serve Prince John after Richard's assassination. Though Scott felt John was actually pretty smart, he got a bad rap, because he introduced taxation, so he's the bad guy in this, and the sheriff would have been torn between the two wrongs of a corrupt king and an outlaw inciting anarchy. Locations were sought in northeast England, including Alnwick Castle, Bamborough Castle, and Kielder Forest. A portion of filming was intended to take place in Northumberland. As a result of the WGA strike, production was put on hold. Scott sought to begin production in 2008, for a release in 2009. Filming was scheduled to begin in August in Sherwood Forest if the 2008 Screen Actors Guild strike did not take place, for release on 26 November 2009. By July, filming was delayed and playwright Paul Webb was hired to rewrite the script. The film was moved to 2010. The Sheriff of Nottingham's character was then merged with Robin. Scott explained Robin has to retire to the forest to resume his name Robin, so he was momentarily the Sheriff of Nottingham. Hedgeland returned to rewrite, adding an opening where Robin witnesses the sheriff dying in battle and takes over his identity. Scott chose to begin filming in February 2009 in forests around London, having discovered many trees which had not been pollinated. Scott was also pleased that the 200-acre Nottinghamshire set that was built during 2008 had aged into the landscape. By February 2009, Scott revealed Nottingham had become his version of Robin Hood, as he had become dissatisfied with the idea of Robin starting as the sheriff. Filming began on 30 March 2009. In June and July, the crew filmed at Freshwater West in Pembrokeshire, Wales. The arrival of the dead King's Cog, accompanied by Robin and his men at the Tower of London, was filmed at Virginia Water, where a partial mock-up of the tower was built. Extensive scenes from the film were filmed on the Ashridge estate Little Gadsden, on the Hertfordshire-Buckinghamshire border. Filming of the Siege of Castle Chalice took place at the Bourne Wood at Farnham, Surrey during July and August. Filming also took place at Dovedale near Ashbourne, Derbyshire. The battering ram used during the filming at the Bourne Wood in Surrey, which was nicknamed Rosie by the film crew and is worth £60,000, was donated by Russell Crowe to a Scottish charity, the Clanranald Trust, to be used for battle reenactments at a fort named Duncarron, built in a forest near the Carron Reservoir in North Lanarkshire. When interviewed in November 2008, Strong stated his character of Sir Godfrey was originally called Conrad, and was based on Guy of Gisborne. He described the original character as having blonde hair, and a disfigurement from being struck by a crossbow bolt. Release. The film was released on 12 May 2010 in 12 countries, including the United Kingdom and Ireland, and was also the opening film at the 2010 Cannes Film Festival the same day. It was released in a further 23 countries the following day, among them Australia, and an additional 17 countries on 14 May 2010, among them the United States and Canada. It was thus released in 52 countries within 3 days. However, it was not released in Japan until 10 December 2010. Home media. Robin Hood was released on DVD and Blu-ray disc on 20 September 2010 in the UK, and the following day in the US, while the UK home media releases only consisted of the extended director's cut version. The US DVD and Blu-ray discs consisted of both the director's cut version and the shorter theatrical version. Critical reception. Critical reaction to Robin Hood has been mixed, with the film holding a 43% rating on review aggregate website Rotten Tomatoes, based on 238 reviews with an average rating of 5.4/10. Another review aggregator, Metacritic, rates the film at 53% based on a normalized rating of 40 reviews. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 2 stars out of 4, writing that little by little, title by title, innocence and joy is being drained out of the movies. Joe Neumayer of the New York Daily News felt that the problem with Russell Crowe's new take on the legend is that it has one muddy boot in history and the other in fantasy. The middling result is far from a bullseye. David Roark of Relevant magazine accused Scott of replacing depth with detail and manipulative themes like vengeance and unjust war, and stated that Scott had sucked the life out of a cherished fable, writing that Scott has turned a myth, a concept, essentially into a history which emerges as dry, insensible clutter. Among the film's more positive reviews, Mick LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle wrote that Scott has great command of his action sequences and praised his sophisticated approach to the material. Ty Burr of the Boston Globe called the film smart, muscular entertainment, and wrote that Crowe possesses a presence and authority to make you forget all about Kevin Costner. Lulu Menick of the New York Post called Robin Hood head and shoulders above the sort of light-headed epics Hollywood typically offers. During the summer season, Russell Crowe received criticism from the British media for his variable accent during the film. Empire said his accent was occasionally Scottish, while Total Film thought there were also times when it sounded Irish. Mark Lawson, while interviewing Crowe on BBC Radio 4, suggested there were hints of Irish in his accent, which angered Crowe, who described this as bollocks and stormed out. A number of reviewers have criticized historical inaccuracies in the film. In the New York Times, A.O. Scott complained that the film made a hash of the historical record. In The Guardian, Alex von Tunzelmann complained that the film was filled with historical impossibilities and anachronisms. She notes that Richard the Lionheart was indeed fighting in France in 1199, but that he had actually come back from the Holy Land 7 years earlier, so it is inaccurate to depict him fighting in France on his way back from the Holy Land in 1199, as is the case in the film. Soundtrack. The soundtrack to Robin Hood, with music written and performed by Mark Streitenfeld, was released on the 11th of May 2010. Possible sequels. Scott indicated he had been considering further films in an interview. with The Times on 4 April 2010 stating, "Honestly, I thought why not have the potential for a sequel, and let's say we might presume there's a sequel." At the world premiere in Cannes, Crowe declared he was willing if I had the opportunity to address what happens next with Ridley and Cate, then great, let's do it. Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Would you like to know more?